And it's so nice to have Sriram Parthasarathy with us today. As part of our IDC alumni talks, we said we will try different varieties of engagement. So one of the things we thought we'll set out to do was to have people from domains outside of design to to exchange their ideas and insights with us, because that also opens up a whole lot of thought process and opportunities for us to participate. So in that context, we have Sriram today. Sriram, as I had shared the profile earlier, um, is a banker turned uh, agri professional, and in between he did some farming too, as a way to take a break from his one side of the profession, which was banking, to move to agriculture. I know Sriram from the days when he launched his startup. That was way back in the 2011, 2012, around that time. That very fascinating kind of ideas then that he wanted to experiment, and I had an opportunity to interact, and then we kept in touch, and I realized the amount of passionate work that he has been doing in this domain. And it so occurred that someone like him who has tried to do something, build his own business in agriculture, which we consider is one of the important element of our economy. I mean, a very impactful component of our economy. And it just occurred to me when we had a chat about the scope of design and design opportunities in that domain. It triggered us into talking more about it. And then we thought it would be a good idea for someone like him to share the entire value chain as he sees it, and then opportunities where there is a lot of design that 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 is left to be explored to contribute to this entire domain of agriculture. So that's what is the context in which we thought that Sriram could actually walk us through his personal experience of running his own startup, and also share some share the entire value chain and opportunities for innovation in that whole value chain. So without much ado, I would hand over the session to Sriram, and we really look forward to this session. Thank you, Sriram. Over to you.
Thanks, Ravi. Good evening, everyone. Delighted to be here. I think it's kind of, as Ravi said, it had an interesting journey. So would love to kind of share some bits of it, and also talk about what is possible in agriculture. Agriculture clearly seems to be in the news these days for the right or the wrong reasons, but it's certainly in the news. So, but it's also exciting times for this sector, which is probably one of the largest sectors among in the Indian business. So I have a small presentation, so we'll kind of go through that. And there, what I'm looking to do is share a little bit about my journey, talk about agriculture at a larger level in what's happening in India, and then spend more time on what are the opportunities for innovation in agri itself. So let's go. So just give me a second while I share my screen. Sorry, just give me a second. Ravi?
Yes.
It's asking for some permissions to, is there any way, when we tried this yesterday, it didn't happen, but suddenly today
I'm just checking. What is that I should do?
I'm not too sure whether you need to kind of be doing something or I need to be, but this is what
does it say?
You must grant permission in order to screen share, it says.
I think the current host should pass on that those rights to him.
Okay.
No, it should be local on a system. But if you want, you can email the presentation to Ravi or me.
Cool. Let me correct right. Well, let's then in this case, I will in any case in that kind of way.
Yesterday it didn't do it, so. Suddenly it is changing the rules again. You're sending it now?
Yeah.
One second.
Just sent it to you. I thought we did this yesterday just to kind of avoid this. For some reason, this seems to be happening.
Yeah, I just received it. Just a second.
Okay.
Sriram, did you use your same machine yesterday as well?
Yes.
Then it is clear.
Hey Ravi, you should not get that message.
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
So cool. So while Ravi is kind of putting it up, let me in any case start off talking about it, and we'll look at the slide. But so my journey has been through banking, farming, as an entrepreneur, and currently I work as a Agri strategist at Reliance, right? So I started as a banker in 1994. It's actually kind of way back. Worked through Barclays, ANZ, Standard Chartered, various foreign banks, right through that in an area called project finance, basically financing large infrastructure, complex projects as such. End of 2009, early 2010, decided enough of banking, decided to kind of make a switch into entrepreneurship. And then I was kind of looking at which sector to go into. Decided to kind of get into Agri because it was a large sector, largely unorganized. And therefore I said, let's kind of have a go at this. Ravi, if you can put it on a presentation mode.
Yeah, I'm having trouble because people are asking to be.
Okay, cool. So
we do that after 5 minutes.
Yeah, go to the next slide, please. You can go to the next slide. So then in 2010, having decided to get into banking, the next slide. Yeah. So having decided to get into agriculture, I had no idea about what agriculture was and what are the kind of challenges there. So I said the best way to learn about the sector is probably do some hands-on farming. That also kind of would give me a bottom-up view of how the whole sector worked. The other thing I decided once I decided to get into agriculture was that Agri basically is two distinct verticals in it. One is the food grains verticals, which is the non-perishables. and the other one is the fruits and vegetables, which is a perishables one. These are although when we talk about agriculture, the first thing that comes to mind is food grains, but these are completely different in terms of how the farmer has to kind of grow the stuff, how it's got to be marketed, all of it. And because the perishables, these fruits and vegetables are perishables, it's a lot more challenging in the current environment for agriculture in India. So that's where I thought maybe there will be more opportunities here, and decided to get into fruits and vegetables. Did farming for 3 years, not my own land. Lots of people have land available, don't know what to do with it. So I basically leased land and worked on that. What this experience taught me was that there are plenty of people who are doing fantastic farming. The problem in this segment is not what happens on the farm, but what happens between the farm and the consumer. So as a result of that, I said, let's work on that part which is more challenging and help the farmers market the produce. So that's where I decided to kind of get into the supply chain and marketing part of the chain. And that was also based on some of the learnings which I had as a farmer. One of the things I was doing as a farmer was also supplying vegetables to different type of buyers, the local markets, the processors, the exporters, and so on. What I realized is that there are Indian farmers who are growing fantastic stuff, which is actually being exported to various other countries, including UK, the rest of Europe, and even some parts of Southeast Asia. So if farmers can grow this kind of a quality, why can't we, the consumer living in India, access this? So I said, let me try this. So that's how I got started off selling fruits and vegetables. So from banker to a farmer to a sabzi wala, if you like it. So what I started off with initially was to say that I will kind of do vegetables that are pesticide residue free, and which meant that I was able to kind of only procure maybe 4, 5, 6 of vegetables which were pesticide residue free directly from the farmers, and started marketing it to consumers in Pune. Pune is where I shifted from Bombay. During my banking days, I was in Bombay, shifted to Pune later. And I said, let me kind of get this piloted with a few customers. I started this way. One of the very interesting feedbacks I got from the customers, he said that, look, this is fantastic. What you're doing is fantastic. We love what you're doing. But the point is that pesticides is not top of mind for me as a consumer, because you may be able to kind of give me 4, 5, 6 vegetables, but the rest of the vegetables I'm consuming are full of pesticides. So just giving me 4 or 5 vegetables doesn't do a great deal for me unless you're able to do the whole thing. But what we love as a consumer was the quality that you were able to get from the farms. So the customer actually came back to me and said that, why don't you do the entire range of vegetables, get it directly from the farms, don't bother about whether it is pesticide free or not, which was a very interesting feedback. Okay, one would have thought as a customer that people would love it, but what I was hearing from the customers was something completely different. We even tried what is typically in digital economy is called as a A/B testing. The same product we would kind of sell, one which is pesticide residue free at a slightly higher price, and one which is the non-pesticide residue free at a lower price. What we found is that customers actually kind of didn't really differentiate or appreciate the fact that things were pesticide residue. So these were some of the learnings which we had as we kind of went along. But what then we did is we focused on getting the quality for the consumer. So initially it started with vegetables, expanded to fruits, then expanded to exotics. So slowly we kind of covered the entire range of produce, anywhere between 80 to 90 different SKUs and in seasons maybe even more. Now, selling vegetables seems very common. We've all seen an old lady sitting with a tokri on the footpath selling vegetables. So we think that it's probably not so difficult a segment to do. If she's able to do it, what's the big deal? But one thing I realized while doing this is that this is probably one of the most challenging businesses one could think of. The reason is that we're talking about some 80 to 90 different items, each coming from different parts of the country. A lot of it, most of it, have different perishability index. While potatoes and onions can be stored, so can some of the fruits. There are things like, say, the leafies, which kind of have a perishability of literally a day. So the challenge is to kind of build a supply chain and a distribution system which addresses the need of all these products and in a manner that it kind of reaches the consumer in a fairly good shape. So that is what we realized as we kind of started building it, was one of the most challenging pieces of supply chain creation which was kind of being done. Ravi, if you can move to the next slide, please. Right. So this is how our supply chain looked like. So at one end we have the produce being sourced from the farms, where we have, and then we kind of pack it at our pack house near the farms itself, where we have a bunch of people sorting and kind of weighing it in standardized sizes and packaging it. Then the produce is transported to a distribution center at the city, and from there we move it to the different parts of the city to further distribute it. Now, a lot of this was in cold chain. Building that again, so when we started this in 2014-15, there was literally no one else doing this, and cold chain was kind of pretty much unheard of in this segment. We were probably one of the first guys to kind of install cold chains right through the from the farm till the customer level, and we're distributing it across multiple different channels, including online ordering, which is kind of for home deliveries. We were kind of setting up pop-up stores in large housing societies and in large companies. Pune has a lot of IT companies, so we got permission from the companies to set up stalls within the complex for the staff. Companies like Persistent, we were doing Wipro, we were doing Honeywell, TCS. So a whole lot of companies we were doing. The other channel we also kind of were doing was distributing through Kirana stores. Kirana stores are typically the grocery stores who don't normally sell vegetables. We were kind of, so since this was, what we had done was that, all our vegetables were packed, branded, of a standardized size and pricing. So we were effectively moving the vegetables into a FMCG model. And therefore, it is easier to sell through Kirana stores as well as modern retail. You can move to the next slide, Ravi. So what was the difference? What did we manage to kind of, how was it different from what was kind of being done? So here, this is how the typical supply chain works for what comes to you through the vegetable vendor. So what we have here is that right on top on the blue strip, we have the timings. We have day and night in the yellow and the gray phases, as well as the number of times the produce is changing hands. So what we see here is the fact that the produce goes through a number of handling processes. Now, because this is perishable, at each handling, there is further damage which is caused to the produce, and therefore the deterioration in quality and reduction in shelf life. So in this process, what we see is that the conventional value chain, there is a lot of handling which goes through. And at the last stage, what happens is that it remains, the produce remains in ambient temperature for almost 12 hours during the day, where temperatures can be as high as, say, 30-35 degrees. The next slide, please, Ravi. So what we were doing was that we were kind of, most of the link was happening within a cold chain, and therefore the product quality was being retained. Also, what we were able to do is minimize the number of handlings by kind of shifting the produce from the pack house to the distribution hubs in a single crate, and therefore ensuring better quality. Next slide, please, Ravi. So this was the brand that we were kind of, we called our brand Mr. Carrot, because one of the things that we didn't want to do was either call it the cliche terms of either green, fresh, etc. Orange and green was a nice bright color for the packaging. What we also wanted to do is kind of, have a happy brand, which effectively, what we wanted to remind our customer, again, to create a brand, what was important for us to visualize who our consumer was. A consumer was typically a lady between 30 and 35 with kids in the range of 5 to 10 years. What we wanted to do is create a happy brand which reminded her of why and for whom she was buying these vegetables at the point of sale. That's why we wanted to kind of create something which is cheerful, happy. With the fonts and all, we kind of went through almost 200 different fonts to kind of come up with this. So that was the story about Mr. Carrot. So let's move on to the next bit. So quick snapshot of how the agriculture sector currently is in India. Next slide, please. Right. So this is something which is interesting. Ravi, if you don't mind, you could put it on the slideshow, please.
Yeah, you have to bear with me because there are people entering the sessions.
Right. Okay. So the interesting thing is that India has the second largest agri area globally. The largest, of course, is US. But what you can see here from this map is that India is the only large country which has agri land closer to the tropics, which basically means that we are probably the only large agricultural country where agriculture can happen 365 days a year across the country. Whereas for countries with agricultural land up north, in the winter months, agricultural activity comes down significantly. Of course, we also have the other advantages of having water, a large domestic market, large human capital who can kind of get involved in agriculture and all of that. But this is the ability to do agriculture 365 days a year is a huge advantage for India. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very quick snapshot of what we produce. We are one of the largest in terms of agricultural production in both cereals and horticulture. Next slide, please. Now, what I wanted to kind of look at is that what we produce, is that sufficient for India? Now, here, what I've tried to do is to estimate, are we kind of producing sufficiently enough for our population of 1.38 billion? Now, both in cereals and in fruits and vegetables, we are producing way more than what we can consume. Like, for example, what you would see in the cereals column is that out of the total domestic availability of 233 million tons, that works out on a population of 1.38 billion, it works out to 462 grams of cereals. Cereals is basically rice, wheat, per person per day. Now, how much does that equate to? It literally equates to about 13 to 15 chapatis per person per day. So we are producing enough rice and wheat to feed the entire population 13 to 15 chapatis per person per day. Now, I'm a reasonably healthy, active person. I kind of do running and work out, but still I can't eat that much. Max I can do is maybe 8 to 10 chapatis a day. But the fact is that we have that much of production, yet we rank I think it's 101 out of 116 countries in the global hunger index, which basically means that a lot of the stuff that we're producing is actually not reaching the consumers. It's the same with fruits and vegetables as well. We are producing way more than what surveys have actually indicated that we consume. So there is an iClear survey which says that per capita consumption is 280 grams, whereas we could have producing 395 grams per person per day. So what does this mean? This basically means that we have a lot more people working in agriculture than are actually required to. And the reason for that is that we have not been able to, as a country, have not been able to create jobs outside of agriculture for them to be occupied in. And because they don't have jobs, they're all in agriculture. And as a result, we end up producing way more than we need to be producing. The other thing is that if we're producing more, what are the options? The options are either the export. Now, exports in cereals is probably not possible because we are not competitive from a cost perspective. Fruits and vegetables is where we have a huge advantage in terms of availability of human capital, and that's probably where I think the government would look to kind of build the export capabilities. We can literally be kind of doing a lot of processed exports across the world. So, Ravi, next slide, please. So, with that background, let's kind of look at some of the areas where there is scope for innovation. Next slide, please. So, before we get into that, this is something that I wanted to kind of put. Basically, the sector is very, very large, and given the size of our country as well, what happens is that the problems and opportunities for participants in this sector across the country differs widely. Our perspective is often kind of driven by what we are able to see immediately. So just to give you an example, a large farmer in Punjab growing wheat on, let's say, 10 acres of land, his perspective of this sector would be completely different from, let's say, a farmer in Maharashtra who's growing fruits and vegetables. Again, different from a farmer in, let's say, a banana farmer in Tamil Nadu who's growing banana for the local market. Completely different from a farmer in Bihar who's kind of literally, surviving on an acre of growing wheat on 1 acre of land. A farmer outside Bangalore growing lettuces in a greenhouse will have a completely different set of challenges and opportunities. So the thing is that the perspective of each different farmer will be completely different, but at the same time, each one is a genuine problem. So the opportunities in this segment are huge. Next slide, please. So what here we're looking at is looking at agriculture, dividing agriculture in 3 segments. One is what happens before the farm. One happens during the farming process, and post-harvest. So there are multiple areas here what I would like to kind of do is that each one of these areas, that there is a lot of scope for innovation across multiple different types of farming that happens in our country. But what I would like to kind of do is just take you through a few of these. We probably will not have the time to kind of go through each one of these separately. But what I want to do is take you through a little bit of depth through some of these things. So let's look at the crop selection. That's a major challenge. So next slide, please, Ravi. Okay. So here what happens is that you've probably all seen situations like this where the prices of a particular commodity, whether it is onion, tomato, or something else, kind of drops dramatically, and farmers are literally forced to dump the produce on the road. I've seen it with my own eyes, onions and tomatoes dumped by the roadside, tons and tons of these. Now, why does this happen? This happens when farmers actually end up producing way more than what is actually the demand at that particular point of time. Now, why does that happen? Why is it that farmers produce more? Now, typically, a farmer kind of growing stuff on 1, 2, or 5 acres of land has no idea how much of that same produce is being grown elsewhere in the country. So what happens is, if a lot of people decide to produce the same item in the same period, we end up with a very large oversupply. And when you have an oversupply, you can't overnight increase the demand. We as consumers consume only what we are going to consume, right? But when the supply goes up, the prices in the market, the wholesale markets drops very rapidly. And as a result, prices might even go down to 1 or 2 rupees a kilo of tomato or onion in peak season. Ravi, if you can hit twice. Yep, one more. So what is the solution to this? How do you kind of get rid of the situation where we have excess supply? The way one can do that is to track what is being grown. The only way to kind of do that at the scale of a country the size of India is to use satellite imaging. Now, earlier, this is something that was kind of fairly difficult to do, but what has happened in recent times is that satellite imaging prices have dropped. Second, satellite imaging resolutions have improved. This is commercial satellites, what's available for people like us, not the military grade satellites. The quality has improved, plus the pricing has dropped. So what can be done is that, based on what we know on the ground and what we can see on the satellite images, using machine learning, we are using big data to kind of look at the satellite images and identify which are the areas on which a particular crop is being grown. And thereby we can actually estimate the quantity of crops that's kind of being grown at a nationwide level. Now, what satellite imagery is also able to do currently is also able to kind of look at the images and say, what stage is the crop at? Is it growing well, not well? All of this is using past images and going through the machine learning process to kind of teach the computers how to identify this automatically and kind of then predict when all of this crop will come into the market. Now, how will that help the farm? Now, if the government knows how much of a particular crop is being planted, they can actually issue guidance to other farmers not to do the planting. Or if we know that there is going to be excess produce available, they can tell traders from other regions or processors to pick up the crop, tell them that there is going to be excess available and you can actually kind of procure it from this particular region of the country, whether it is the west or the south. So by that way, a lot of the excess supply can be either reduced or absorbed by other buyers. Now, this is something that technology is available. The machine learning is possible. But for whatever reason, this is not being done. This is something that probably needs to be done at a government level. Unfortunately, not happening at the moment. But clearly a big market for this. Next slide, Ravi. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is the possibility is...
Sriram, maybe 5 minutes we'll give to...
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Then we'll have some time for questions. Sorry.
Right. So what we have here is that we've all kind of been through the situation where using a watermelon looks fine from the outside. We expect a red, juicy watermelon inside, but once you cut it, it's white outside. Now, right now, there is no technology available to identify how the fruit is inside. Okay, this is not a problem only with watermelon. It's with a number of other fruits also. Ravi, if you can hit the button, please. Another one. So these are various fruits where we have this problem. Whether it is watermelon, avocado, I'm sure a lot of us have had problems with avocado. Looks perfectly fine, but fails to ripen. Same with things like sweet lime and orange. Now, again, this is technology which currently exists, and it just needs to be adapted for this. Now, we have small handheld ultrasonic devices which are used for gauging thickness of various objects. Now, what if that could be fitted into a small device, maybe the size of a handheld torch kind of a thing, and could actually be used to gauge the thickness or the ripeness of fruits, right? What would probably need to be done is that it will have to be reprogrammed for different fruits, because the thickness of a outer skin of watermelon is different from that of a sweet lime, which is again different from avocado. So that's where the Bluetooth connectivity to a mobile would help. But clearly the technology exists to kind of create something like this. The next slide, please, Ravi. This is another very interesting use case where innovation is clearly required. Agri insurance today is a big disaster. Now, what happens is that the government has got a scheme for a comprehensive agri insurance, which insures everything from, let's say, drought to excessive rains to a lot of other fires and lots of other scenarios. But what happens under that policy is that farmers are charged, very, very low premium, which is typically about 1 to 2% of the overall sum insured. And the government takes the remaining cost, whereas the government ends up paying a premium to the private insurers of something like 30%. So the farmer is paying 1%, the insurance company is getting a premium of 30%, the government is paying the remaining 25 to 30% difference, which is going to the private insurer. But that, again, because it is, it's a very, I won't go into the details, we probably don't have that, but it's a complete disaster. Both the farmers and the insurance companies keep complaining. There's a lot of political pressures. It's kind of a, so one of the things which is possible is that if we can limit the insurance just to a specific event-based insurance, something like say a weather-based insurance. Now, what happens in this case is that most of the weather incidents, like let's say there is a sudden rain. Now, the last couple of weeks we've had sudden rain, which is kind of, sometimes unexpected this time of the year. What that does is for the farmer, it does not necessarily destroy his entire crop. What it would lead to is that it would lead to additional cost in the form of either spraying or some other process in the at the farm. Now, what if insurance can be limited to that? So effectively, what we're talking about is that creating small-sized insurance packages, affordable for the farmer, and for a payout of something like maybe 1,000, 2,000 rupees, where the farmer pays maybe 10 rupees or 20 rupees. So it's effectively sachetizing insurance policies, right? So where does this term, this sachetized term, comes from? What we've kind of seen in things like FMCG, where shampoo, for example, has kind of the sachet shampoos have taken up so well in the rural areas that today sachets comprise almost 70% of the total market of shampoos in India. Can we do something similar with insurance, right? Again, the technology is there. It's just that someone needs to do, and it's a huge market. This is insurance market is something that runs into lakhs of crores. Once more, Ravi, can you hit the button? Yeah. So it's effectively geotagging farms, creating an array of rain sensors across the country, and using big data to validate whether there has been a rain in that particular area. So you don't necessarily need to send a physical surveyor to check whether there has been rain. You just need to kind of know, okay, if there has been so many of rain, there will be a payout. So again, this is what is this is possibly can change the way farmers look at insurance in this country, and it's a huge market. Next slide, please, Ravi. Again, when it comes to sorting and grading, we have come some ways where we are kind of doing mechanical sorting. So you have the images you see on the top of your screen. These are mechanical sorters, which so what is now possible is it's also something called optical sorting using optical sensors, where not only are you looking at the size, but you're also looking at the quality of the produce, whether it is physically damaged, whether it is of a particular shape or not. The same thing, what you see below is that the image of chilies and bhindi, where optical sorting can actually kind of improve what you see, what the modern retail and the exporters would like would be the image which is on the right, whereas what comes out of the farm is what the image on the left. Right now, all of this being sorted manually, which is a huge hindrance. If we can use optical sorting for do this, there's a large market readily available for this. Next slide, please, Ravi. This is again an interesting use case where innovation is actually starting to happen. This is traceability, especially for the export market and for large modern retail. This becomes very important to understand where the produce is coming from and how it has kind of moved along the chain. Now, you might see this QR code in the middle of the bottom row on your screens. Some of you may be able to kind of scan this QR code from your mobiles. You should try it. It would be interesting. So what this QR code actually kind of does is tells you how the process, the produce has moved through the chain. If you can go to the next slide, Ravi. Right. So the second image, it basically tells you that on the top, this is the IV gourd. It's a 250 gram pack of IV gourd, which has been, the retail price is at 30 rupees. It then tells you how much the farmer got, what is the transportation cost, and the cost breakup across the chain. So this, having this ability to kind of do traceability, kind of provides multiple options to the company, to the retailer, to kind of show which farmer is it coming from, what is the kind of cost breakup. You can also kind of, where there is pesticide-free produce being talked about, especially in products like grapes, you can also kind of actually look at the certification, the pesticide-free certification for the farmer. And also, like the screenshot on the extreme left is there is, under the name of the farmer, there's a button. If you click that, you can actually kind of go and see where exactly his farm is located. So these are some of the interesting possibilities in terms of what is actually being done, and a number of, and similarly, some of the other areas also, there is huge potential for innovation in this sector. So that's it. I'm sorry I had to rush the last bits, rush through some of the last bits. But what would be interesting to kind of talk about is that we have a very, very interesting community of people with a lot of experience in design, and how this community can contribute to innovation in agri in India. And clearly that is the need of the sector at the moment. So would love to kind of hear your thoughts, and also if you have any other questions, want to discuss anything, happy to do that.
Sure. I mean, thank you, Sriram. I think within the limited time, we were able to give a good gamut of what's going on, and also trace from the personal example of what you went through as an entrepreneur. So I just want to open it to the group, and if you have any thoughts, questions for Sriram, we'll start the conversation from there. I know we have kind of, I'm just looking at maybe about 15 minutes of this session. We may have to extend by 5 minutes because we started a little late. So anybody?
So I think Venkat has a question.
I think we have a question here from Venkat.
Yeah, Venkat, you want to
Yeah.
unmute and yeah, go ahead. Venkat?
So
Yeah, I put the question there. Yeah, Sriram, I think you can go ahead and answer it.
okay. So look, you're right. What you kind of said in the question is basically, a lot of consumers do not particularly give that much of an importance to things like pesticide residue in vegetables. It was a surprise to me as well. Initially I wasn't very sure of why this would be the case, because I would have thought that pesticides residue is something that should concern all of us. But then what I realized is that a lot of people don't really kind of understand, what kind of damage a lot of these pesticides can cost. That's one. Second is also that, this is something that people have. It's a human nature, I guess, that when you have a situation which can be adverse to you, but you don't have a way out, you don't have any other option, because currently, even if someone kind of does pesticide residue-free vegetables or fruits, it's only a very, very small part of what your overall consumption is. And every time you think about that, you are reminded of the fact that everything else that you are consuming has pesticides in it. And maybe it's just that people don't want to think about it. People don't want to kind of think that this is what I'm forced to buy and feed my children with stuff which has pesticides.
No,
I
I myself, I'm a customer who don't care much about whether this is organic or pesticide free or fertilizer free, right? In fact, I would explain it by saying that it doesn't matter, because there are ways by which we can get rid of this residue by washing reasonably well, and as well as the quantity is so less that it doesn't matter really, right? So our is this my suspicion has always been that that a lot of people do not care about it, and for a very good reason. I'm not lamenting the fact that they are not caring. Okay, I'm actually glad that they are not caring. Okay, so is this a very small niche market that somebody really cares about these things? Or I'm really glad that this was an insight that came from you. But I just want to understand why is that it's such a widespread view.
Look, again, my view on this might be slightly controversial, but I do not think that the pesticides that we're consuming are harmless for us, okay, or can be washed, can be got rid of just by washing. So, when you put iodix on your skin, right, it just doesn't remain on your skin. It penetrates your skin and goes into your body. The same way, when you spray pesticides, it does go into the body of the fruit or vegetable. So just washing on top does not necessarily get rid of it, right? The other thing is also that something a lot of people are not aware of is that the pesticide regulations in India are fairly lax. So the kind of pesticides that are being used in India, there are a lot of stuff which is not permitted in the developed markets, either in US or Europe. Europe is obviously the most strict in terms of these. So yes, pesticides do matter, but it's just that we don't have a choice. I think it's possibly the government which needs to kind of wake up and kind of put a restriction on pesticides which should not be used. But given the size of the country, it's very difficult to kind of keep track of these things, which is probably why the government is not kind of doing much on this front.
Okay, thank you.
So Sriram, I have a question.
Sure.
So, and my question is based on your experience and what you see in the industry. Is investment in the agri space, is it happening at a more accelerated pace now? And do you feel good about it, or do you think it is still quite low?
I think we are nowhere near where we need to be.
Okay.
We are nowhere near where we need to be. I think it is there seems to be a lack of direction in the policies which government is driving this country towards. I think, as I've explained earlier, we clearly have an advantage when it comes to fruits and vegetables. The advantage is that we have the right kind of climatic condition to produce 365 days a year. We have small agricultural plots, which we've always been told is a bad thing for agriculture. It's bad for growing rice and wheat because you can't, you can't kind of mechanize the agricultural process. But when it comes to fruits and vegetables, mechanization is typically not possible. You need human capital there, which we have plenty of. So as a country, we can actually do a phenomenal amount of fruits and vegetables, which can be either exported in to a limited number of countries in the raw form, in the fresh form, or processed into juices, into pastes and all kinds of stuff, and be exported across the globe. And that is a market where I think we need to focus on, which unfortunately the government has not really kind of looked at, and that's been a disappointment. But even in other areas, I think there is some amount of activity which is starting to happen, but still we have a long way to go to get to where we need to be.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, just about 2 questions.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had one question.
is it Vaibhav?
Sure.
Yes, sir. Why?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, sir, actually, I wanted to ask. You mentioned about that the food which goes waste when sometimes farmers get angry, and we are actually producing way more than what is required. So,
Right.
like one of the solutions for it could be like what you mentioned correctly, like getting this proper machine learning and to getting to know what the produce is happening, and accordingly we can suggest farmer what to produce. That could be one. But at what I also was thinking what about the biogas plants, like where this waste could be invested, and you get a good manure, a rich organic manure, and also like it can be used for producing electricity. Like I came across one industry where like it is near Hyderabad, which is using this waste and producing electricity out of it. So it like a two-way solution.
So some of these plants that you mentioned would probably be using waste like rice husk and things like that. It's typically not possible with fruits and vegetables, because the water content in these is way higher, and you can't really convert it into energy form very easily. Second is that when these kind of situations happen, it is unfortunate, but you can't really predict where it is happening and when it is happening. And then there is this challenge of kind of transporting the produce from wherever there is access to where these plants are located. So that's one of the reasons why it has not commercially happened.
So sir, like still like coming to any city kind of a scenario. So like the amount of produce which is coming from villages and all, so there must be some part of it which must be not getting sold, or which is not good. So what is the amount of that which goes waste?
In fact, there are a couple of initiatives which are already kind of being done using that to kind of typically this happens in the wholesale markets where there is a lot of produce comes and a lot of stuff gets wasted. So there are some initiatives which are already kind of being worked on to convert that into a manure which can be again used in the fields as fertilizer. So that those kind of initiatives are already there.
Okay. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And just one last question, anybody, before we close? Okay. So I've flashed Sriram your contact screen, and I'm sure you will have opportunities for most of us to come back to you and engage with you, and then look at opportunities to collaborate. And you also feel free to connect with this community. And let me thank you. It's very hard to compress a whole lot of ideas, and especially when you talk about innovation, it's just a huge universe by itself. But I think you did a fantastic job putting it all together, and I think you tickled us a bit to think about areas that individually where you could we could actually extend these thoughts, and then in our own ways start looking at opportunities to innovate, probably suggest or guide people that we interact with. In that sense, I think this was a very interesting session, and very different from the kind of sessions we usually have. So that way, thanks for taking this lead and doing this for us. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
on behalf of this group, I mean, I first of all, I thank all the members who have taken time off to be part of this. And some of you have stayed about 5 minutes overtime. And then on behalf of this entire group, we wish you all the best, Sriram, and hope to see you more often.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
guys. And before we close, I just want to let you all know that next week we have a session by Dr. Arvind Srinivas from the Arvind Eye Care Hospital. It's going to be on how Arvind Eye Care is used to in optimizing their operations and eye care. So we'll have a session. So with that, we'll close this session and wish you all a great week. Again, see you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Sriram.
Thank you, Sriram. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.